He walked into a college bar and was seen on camera. But no one ever saw him come out, and he was never found. Brian Shaffer was a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University with a bright future and a charming smile. Friends described him as ambitious, warm, and always the kind of guy who lit up a room. His dream wasn't just to practice medicine, he wanted to be a doctor who truly changed lives. But under that bright exterior, he was still grieving. Just 3 weeks before he vanished, Brian had lost his mother to a long battle with cancer. But that loss might have shaped more than just his future, it may have impacted how he disappeared. Brian's family and friends said he wasn't the same after his mom passed.
Some stories are never solved. Victims forgotten, evidence buried. At True Crime Watchers HQ, we bring the truth back to light. Subscribe and never stop watching.
While he still went out and cracked jokes, he also started pulling back from people emotionally. His father, Randy Shaffer, later admitted that Brian had been distant in those weeks. But no one could have imagined just how strange things were about to get. And just days later, Brian would vanish into thin air, in a place where cameras should have caught everything. It was the start of spring break, and Brian made plans to kick it off with some friends. Earlier that Friday, he had dinner with his dad, a quiet, routine meal. He told his father he planned to relax over break and maybe go on a trip with his girlfriend, Alexis. That night, around 9 p.m., Brian met up with his friend Clint Florence. They hit a couple of bars along Columbus's University District, doing what many college students did, bar hopping, drinks, and laughs. But something about that night would mark the last time Brian was ever seen. By 1 a.m., the two friends had made their way to the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a bar located in a second-story space above a small alley off High Street. Security cameras at the entrance showed Brian arriving with Clint and another friend, Meredith Reed. Meredith gave them a ride and joined them for a drink. And this was the moment where everything became a puzzle, one that still confuses investigators to this day. At 1:15 a.m., security footage shows Brian at the top of the escalator outside the bar, laughing and talking to two women. Then, he steps away, walking back toward the bar entrance. That's the last time anyone, including the cameras, saw Brian Shaffer. But here's the thing, there was only one public entrance and exit to the bar. And Brian never appeared on camera leaving. Police reviewed hours of footage, frame by frame. Multiple exits were checked. The bar's back exit led into a construction zone, blocked off and dangerous. There was no sign that he left through it. Some speculated, could he have changed clothes, disguised himself, and slipped out? But no such person appeared on camera either. It's as if Brian Shaffer simply disappeared inside the bar. To this day, that's the most baffling part of the case. Surveillance footage showed everyone else, Clint, Meredith, bar staff, other patrons, leaving the building. But not Brian. And so began one of the most frustrating missing persons cases in U.S. history. When Alexis, Brian's girlfriend, couldn't reach him the next morning, she thought he'd just overslept. But when he didn't show up for their planned trip to Miami on Monday, a trip they'd talked about for months, her worry turned into panic. His family reported him missing, and Columbus police began a full investigation. They pulled camera footage, searched nearby construction sites, dumpsters, stairwells, rooftops, everything. But listen to this, not a single clue ever surfaced. No wallet. No phone. No trace of Brian Shaffer anywhere. The bar was searched multiple times. So was the alley, the storm drains, nearby buildings, and even local hospitals. Police couldn't even find a sign of a struggle or foul play. The Ugly Tuna wasn't some massive club, it was a modest-sized bar. Yet somehow, a man simply vanished from it without explanation. And that led to wild theories, false sightings, and the unraveling of personal relationships. At first, Clint, Brian's close friend who was with him that night, cooperated with the investigation. But after the initial search, something changed. Clint refused to take a polygraph test. He hired a lawyer and stopped speaking to police entirely. That silence raised serious suspicions. Brian's father publicly pleaded with Clint to help. He said, if Clint had nothing to hide, why would he need an attorney? But Clint never responded. Even now, almost 2 decades later, he's never spoken again about that night. And that made people ask, what exactly happened inside the ugly tuna that night? As days turned into weeks, the mystery deepened. With no trace of Brian leaving the bar, people began coming up with theories, some grounded in logic, others far more bizarre. One theory suggested that Brian had somehow fallen or been pushed into the construction zone behind the ugly tuna saloon. It was dangerous, poorly lit, and cluttered with debris. But even after a full search with cadaver dogs and infrared scans, nothing turned up. No blood. No clothing. No body. Others speculated that Brian had staged his disappearance, that maybe the grief from losing his mother and pressure from med school had become too much. Could he have run off and started a new life? But listen to this, Brian's bank accounts were untouched. His phone never pinged again. And he didn't take his passport. There were no purchases, no online logins, no bus or flight records. Absolutely nothing. If Brian faked his death, he did it better than anyone ever had, and for no clear reason. While police chased dead ends, Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, held on to hope. They'd been talking about getting engaged. She truly believed he was the one. Every day after his disappearance, she called his cell phone, even though it had stopped working. Then, in a strange twist, something happened that sent chills down her spine. In September, 5 months after Brian vanished, Alexis called his number again. And this time, it rang. She immediately contacted investigators. The phone rang 3 more times before going to voicemail. Police traced the call, but it pinged off a cell tower in Hilliard, Ohio, just 14 miles from Columbus. Was Brian alive and nearby? Had someone found his phone and turned it on? Or was this a cruel fluke of technology? Cell experts later said it could have been a glitch, where a call rings even though the phone is off. But no one could say for sure. And this moment, a phantom phone call, reignited hope and dread. Brian's father, Randy, refused to give up. He spent every free hour hanging missing posters, speaking to the media, and begging for tips. He searched alleyways, shelters, hospitals, anywhere Brian could have ended up. He even got into online forums, reading through conspiracy theories, hoping someone somewhere had seen his son. But as the months dragged on, tips dried up. Public interest faded. And Randy was left standing alone. Then, in a heartbreaking twist, tragedy struck the Shaffer family again. In September 2008, just 2 years after Brian's disappearance, a windstorm hit Ohio. During the chaos, a tree branch snapped and struck Randy Shaffer outside his home. He died instantly. The man who had carried the torch for his son's case was gone, without ever learning what happened. But that's not the chilling part. What happened next still haunts people to this day. After Randy's obituary was posted online, a comment appeared under it. It read, "Dad, I love you. Brian." The IP address was traced to Franklin County, Ohio, the same county where Brian disappeared. Could Brian have written it? Or was someone playing a cruel joke? Investigators tried to track the user, but it led to a public computer with no login history. The comment remains unexplained. And with Randy's death, the case lost its most passionate advocate. By now, many people suspected Clint Florence, Brian's friend, knew more than he was saying. He had refused to speak publicly, refused to take a polygraph, and lawyered up almost immediately after Brian disappeared. His silence made people suspicious, especially after he stopped responding to calls from Alexis and Brian's family. Years later, when asked why Clint wouldn't take a lie detector test, his lawyer responded bluntly. "My client has told everything he knows. He doesn't believe a polygraph is necessary." But police disagreed. They believed Clint was the last person to see Brian up close, possibly even inside the ugly tuna when the cameras lost sight of him. So why wouldn't he help more? What was he hiding? Clint eventually moved away and built a life elsewhere. He has never been publicly charged, accused, or arrested in connection with the case. But his silence remains one of the most frustrating elements in the mystery of Brian Shaffer. Over the years, dozens of tips came in from people across the country, and even across the world, claiming to have seen Brian. The most bizarre came from Sweden, where a man believed he saw Brian at a beachside cafe, living under a different name. Police followed up but couldn't confirm anything. Other tips suggested he was living homeless in Ohio, had joined a cult, or was being held against his will. But not one of those leads ever panned out. Not one. There was never a photo, a verified sighting, or any physical evidence to confirm Brian was alive. Still, the idea that he could be out there, living in secret or unable to return, kept hope alive. But hope without answers slowly eats away at those left behind. As of today, Brian Shaffer's case remains open, but cold. There have been no new developments, no forensic breakthroughs, and no trace of him for nearly 2 decades. The bar where he vanished, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, has since closed. The area was redeveloped. But the question lingers. How can someone disappear from a public place, without ever being seen leaving? Columbus PD says they're still accepting tips. Brian's photo remains on missing persons databases. And every now and then, a new generation of internet sleuths stumbles across the case and starts digging. But without new evidence, the story remains exactly what it's been for 19 years, a riddle with no answer. As the trail went cold, many began wondering if Brian's disappearance wasn't a crime, but a choice. In the weeks before he vanished, Brian had been dealing with the recent death of his mother, a demanding medical program, and intense personal pressure. Psychologists have weighed in, suggesting that grief can sometimes drive people to walk away from their lives, especially when they feel trapped by expectations. But Brian didn't leave a note. He didn't withdraw money. And there were no signs he planned to run. His father, Randy, insisted Brian had plans. He was going to propose to his girlfriend. He had bought tickets for a vacation. Everything pointed toward a man who was looking forward, not running away. Still, what if something inside him snapped that night? Some theorized that Brian might have found a way out of the bar that police missed. That maybe he did leave through the construction zone, unnoticed, and never looked back. But here's where the theory breaks down. No one ever saw him again. Not at a shelter. Not on a bus. Not at a hospital. And not even a digital footprint online. For someone to escape that cleanly, for that long, requires planning, and Brian didn't plan anything. The most debated question in this case is simple. How could Brian leave without being caught on camera? The Ugly Tuna Saloona had only one main entrance, monitored by a security camera pointed right at the escalator and doorway. That footage showed Brian entering, but never leaving. Investigators reviewed hours of tape, even rewatched every customer leaving the bar. But he never appeared again. Some theories emerged. Could Brian have disguised himself, with a hat, hoodie, or jacket, and left unnoticed? Could he have slipped out between camera frames, when the footage skipped or lagged? Or worse, could something have happened to him inside the bar itself? But listen to this, the cameras weren't continuous. They took still images every few seconds, not constant video. That left small windows, just seconds long, where someone could potentially slip by without being seen. But for that to happen, Brian would have needed perfect timing, the right disguise, and nerves of steel. It's possible, but incredibly unlikely. This leads to one of the darker theories, that someone inside the bar harmed Brian, and he never had the chance to walk out. Could a fight have broken out? Was there an accident? Did someone panic and try to cover it up? The bar was relatively small. No blood, mess, or broken furniture was found. Nothing appeared out of place. But the bar was undergoing renovations, and there was a service elevator and a back exit leading to a construction site, an area never fully covered by cameras. Could someone have taken Brian out that way? Could his body have been hidden in construction debris and removed later? It's a chilling thought. But again, no evidence. No suspicious staff. No forensic clues. No confession. Nothing. If something happened to Brian inside that bar, whoever was responsible covered it up flawlessly. As years passed and the official investigation slowed, the internet picked up the case. Reddit threads, YouTube videos, podcasts, Brian Shaffer's disappearance became one of the internet's most obsessed over mysteries. Amateur sleuths dissected the footage frame by frame. Some claimed they saw a shadowy figure in the background. Others believed the timestamps didn't add up. Some even accused police of hiding key information. The subreddit r/unresolved mysteries has hosted dozens of threads about Brian. One user even recreated a 3D map of the ugly tuna to try to simulate possible escape routes. But none of the online theories have led to any real answers. Brian's case is like a locked room mystery, only instead of a room, it's a public bar in a busy city, with surveillance and dozens of witnesses. And somehow, still, nothing. In today's world, it's nearly impossible to vanish without leaving some sort of trail. But Brian's phone? Dead. Bank accounts? Untouched. Social media? Silent. Credit cards? Never used again. There's no sign he was ever online after March 31, 2006. Even the most skilled vanishers slip up eventually. A search, a call, a friend request. Something. But with Brian, it's radio silence. For almost 2 decades. This is part of what makes the case so eerie. He didn't just disappear physically, he vanished digitally too. It's like he became a ghost. Despite the silence, Brian's name has never faded from the true crime world. His case appears in nearly every top 10 unsolved disappearances list. YouTube documentaries rack up millions of views. Podcasts revisit the story year after year. And every new disappearance that echoes his, a man vanishing without a trace, gets compared to Brian Shaffer. Some creators have even attempted to track down Clint Florence or Alexis to ask for new statements, but most have stayed quiet. The reason people are still obsessed with this case isn't just because it's unsolved, it's because it feels impossible. How can someone be watched entering a bar, and never come out? It's the perfect mystery. A real-life magic trick with no reveal. And that's what keeps the internet coming back. Again and again. Of course, with every famous case comes outlandish speculation. Some theories posted online include: Brian was abducted by human traffickers, highly unlikely, there's no supporting evidence. He faked his death and became a monk, Yes, really. He was a victim of a serial killer operating in Ohio at the time, unconfirmed. The police were involved in a cover-up, no credible proof. These ideas get clicks, but offer no real answers. Investigators have consistently said there's no evidence of a crime, no evidence of voluntary disappearance, and no suspect. Just an empty bar. A security camera. And a man who vanished inside a crowd. And every theory eventually hits the same wall: where did Brian go? It's been nearly 2 decades since Brian Shaffer vanished without a trace. In that time, the story has evolved from a missing persons case into one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries in modern American history. With every year that passes, the puzzle seems to get more surreal. And yet, one theory keeps lingering, whispered in forums, mentioned in Reddit rabbit holes, and occasionally hinted at by investigators off the record. It's not just about what happened to Brian that night, but who may be keeping the secret. Let's talk about the darkest, most chilling theory of all, that someone in Brian's inner circle knows exactly what happened, and has taken that truth to the grave, or is still carrying it around. We've already touched on Clint Florence, Brian's friend and the last person confirmed to be with him that night. Clint has long refused to take a polygraph test, even though police have publicly stated that he was never officially a suspect. But Clint's silence has drawn speculation for years. In a 2008 interview, private investigator Don Corbett, who was working the case independently, said something chilling. "If Brian is found, I believe Clint knows more than he's ever let on." But here's the strange part. Clint has a lawyer. And that lawyer made a public statement. If law enforcement asks him to do something and it's in his best interest, he will. If not, he won't. That's not the tone of someone desperately trying to help find their missing friend. People close to Brian say Clint became increasingly evasive after the disappearance. He stopped speaking with the media. He distanced himself from mutual friends. And his story, while consistent on paper, never really answered the central question: why did Brian separate from the group, and where did he go? There's a possibility, one so chilling it keeps resurfacing. Brian may have left the bar using a rarely used service exit, one that wasn't covered by cameras. At the time, the Ugly Tuna had a back entrance that led to a construction zone. It was a dangerous area, full of debris and poorly lit. Some believe Brian, possibly intoxicated and confused, attempted to exit through that zone, and fell into an area where his body was either obscured or accidentally sealed off when the construction advanced days later. But if this theory were true, wouldn't some trace, his phone, his wallet, his clothing, have been found during the building's inspection? Here's where it gets eerie. The area wasn't fully searched for years. Some parts of the construction site were considered unsafe for cadaver dogs. By the time a full search was done, the site had already transformed, meaning if Brian had died there, any evidence could have been long gone. Brian's father, Randy Shaffer, never gave up. He hounded police for years. He followed up on every tip, every sighting, every rumor, no matter how unlikely. He believed someone had hurt his son. And he kept a candle lit in his home, both figuratively and literally. But in a cruel twist of fate, Randy died in 2008, when a branch fell during a windstorm and struck him while he was cleaning debris in his yard. At his memorial, someone left a note in the online guest book. It read, "To Dad, love Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands." Police traced the IP address. It was a prank. A disgusting one. But it symbolized just how far people would go to exploit this story, and how desperate the world was for any sign that Brian might still be out there. In the 2010s, Brian's case took on a new life, through Reddit, YouTube, Facebook groups, and even TikTok. Amateur sleuths began examining the security footage, frame by frame, claiming to find glitches or shadows that could mean Brian was never alone. Some claim the camera timestamps may have been manipulated. Others believe Brian wasn't in the footage at all, and that the man everyone thinks is Brian may have been someone else entirely. The speculation only increased when a man resembling Brian was seen in Tijuana, Mexico, in 2014. The photo circulated like wildfire, same facial features, same build, even a similar band on the wrist. But when analyzed, it turned out to be another false lead. Could Brian Shaffer have faked his death, and disappeared by choice? Some elements support the idea. Brian was devastated by his mother's death just weeks earlier. He was stressed about school, debating whether to continue his medical studies. He spoke often about starting fresh somewhere tropical. He was obsessed with Jimmy Buffett and the idea of escaping. Maybe he walked out that night, staged his exit cleverly, and began a new life. But if so, why never reach out? Why not even leave a message for his brother Derek, whom he was close to? That's what makes this theory fall apart. Brian wasn't impulsive. And if he had planned a getaway, there'd be some evidence, withdrawal, a planted clue, something. But there's nothing. Not even a footprint. Brian's brother, Derek Shaffer, has been left to pick up the emotional wreckage. In interviews, Derek has described the pain of living in limbo, the grief without closure, the birthdays that passed like ghostly echoes. He once said, "It's like being stuck in a loop. You think you've accepted it, and then you hear a song or see someone who looks like him, and everything comes flooding back." The pain has extended to the Columbus community. Brian's case is often cited in Ohio law enforcement training sessions as a case that defies logic. Some believe Brian never left the bar because he died inside of it, and that someone covered it up. It's a grim suggestion, but not impossible. The Ugly Tuna was a loud, chaotic bar, with back rooms, utility closets, and access to maintenance corridors. Could a fight have broken out? Could Brian have fallen, hit his head, and someone panicked? Could his body have been smuggled out with trash or hidden until later? This would require coordination. But it also explains why there's no footage of him leaving, no trail, and no leads. Police say they searched every inch of the bar, but even they admit, if it happened quickly, and if someone knew what they were doing, it's possible. To this day, Brian Shaffer remains on missing persons databases. His face appears on digital billboards from time to time. His friends are older now. Some are married. Some have children. But he's frozen in time, 27 years old, in a t-shirt and jeans, smiling through grainy footage on the night he disappeared. Whether he was taken, fled, or met a tragic accident, the mystery endures. Not just because we don't know what happened, but because it feels like we should. How does someone vanish, in front of a camera? What's your theory on the Brian Shaffer case? Do you think he planned his escape, or was he the victim of something far more sinister? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this story compelling, subscribe to True Crime Watchers HQ for more real unsolved mysteries.